Is the 15th book of the Monogatari series worth reading? We're going to talk about that coming up next. Hello everybody and welcome to this light novel review. I'm Justus R. Stone and my channel is all about helping you find brand new light novels to love and enjoy, or maybe teaching you something new about light novels. In any case, if you're not subscribed, hit that button down below so you don't miss any of my future light novel videos. In this review, I'm going to be talking about, like I said, the 15th volume, if we're going by English numbering, of the Monogatari series. This one, Koyomimonogatari, Part 1. Yes, Part 1 in English. We do have a Part 2. In Japan, this was actually one big honkin' book, but Vertical decided not to give us carpal tunnel syndrome and give us a slightly lighter book to read, which actually is good for me because this is a short story volume, and I find short story volumes very hard to get through, regardless of how good they are. So I was kind of glad it wasn't, 500+ pages. Like I said, this one is released in English by Vertical. It's got a translation by Daniel Joseph. The author, of course, is Nisioisin, and the cover artwork is by Vofan. If you want to pick up your own copy of this book, I've got links in the description down below. So as I said, this is a short story volume, but not just any short story volume. It is a very retrospective type short story volume. If you've been keeping up with this series, you know that our last volume, Tsukimonogatari, was the kickoff of a brand new season and supposedly the last season of the Monogatari series, which again in hindsight we know is not true, but nonetheless that was the intention, that this would be the end. It ended with quite a bang. It set up what seems to be probably the biggest story arc that we're going to have in this series to date. And then all of a sudden we slam on the brakes and we hit this book. I think it's best to view Koyomimonogatari as Nisioisin having a bit of a breather, a moment to pause and take a look back at the series and take a look back at the characters that have shaped this series, because we literally go back to only about a month or so after Kizumonogatari, and then we continue through the months, meeting the characters just shortly after Araragi has quote-unquote helped them with their aberration. So structurally, each of the stories is very much like sort of a mini mystery where Araragi is talking to whichever of the female protagonists, and they tell him about something that they have discovered which seems odd. Araragi investigates, we come up with a solution, everybody goes home happy. If you've gotten to this point in the series, I think that there's a lot of fun to be had in these books because you get to see characters that either have not been in the series for a while, who exited the series. We get to see characters in a way that they have sort of outgrown as the series has gone along. Do we all remember when Senjogahara would walk around with a whole bunch of potentially lethal stationery stashed on her? Yeah, we get to go back and talk to that Senjogahara and wonder to ourselves, okay, well, we know that she's gonna love Araragi, but maybe she'll stab him before we get through this short story. We get to see Hachiguji again. We get to see Oshino again. We get to see Sengoku before she became like an insane snake god. So basically this chronologically follows each of the females that he deals with. It's a chronological tour through the series, basically. So as these female characters were introduced in the series, that's the order that we meet them in these short stories. Thematically, this one takes a look at things like choices, pathways, roadways, a lot of themes about reflection. And it probably makes sense, as I said, to consider this as sort of a reflection by Nisioisin on the series that he's created, knowing that it's coming soon to a close. It also means that Nisioisin gets to play with some of the themes that he has discussed in the book, taking a look at things in life that most of us would go, that's kind of strange. But when you have characters that have encountered aberrations suddenly seeing those things, they see them in a very different light. So it deals with themes of how coming into contact with aberrations can change you, can change your perception of the world around you. It also begins to show how even natural phenomenon, if it is unexplainable enough, can become an aberration because of the absolute firm belief that people who witness it can have that it is indeed abnormal, that it is supernatural. And so it discusses a little bit about that whole idea of how something can transition from being normal and being natural to being the unnatural, the aberration. Heck, we even get a point where we like to chat about how we can swindle middle schoolers and make them believe in curses and buy fake charms. All in all, if you've liked the Monogatari series up to date, you'll probably really appreciate these stories. Sort of a trip down memory lane, and returning the series a little bit more to those very compartmentalized stories of problem, investigation, solution that we had in the very beginning. And the fact that they're short stories also means that you don't have 80, 90 pages of a single banal conversation that really means nothing to the story overall. Instead, you just have some quick-witted little banter and double talk like we're used to in this series, and some nice character interactions, and a kind of cool, cute little mystery to go along with the whole thing. The only thing that I will say for these short stories is that there doesn't really seem to be any reason for them to exist in terms of the season going forward. It doesn't really feel like these stories are setting anything up or that they had to be told before we continued in the season. They are very compartmentalized, very in their own moment, and they seem to exist, as I said, just much more for the sake of fans, for Nisioisin, and for him to play with themes and characters and such in a way that he hasn't done in some time. So definitely a good read for fans of the Monogatari series, but certainly not a jumping on point, and certainly not going to change your mind about this series if somehow you've gotten here and you're not a huge fan at this point. In this video, I want to say a special thanks to Renzos, Cine, Drone205, FixLab.com, and Michaela Werner for their support on Patreon, as well as the support of all of my patrons who help me to buy books so that I can do reviews here on the channel, as well as paying for things like hosting for the Light Novel podcast so we can reach as many listeners as possible. Now, speaking of my patrons, they told me in the last poll that I ran for them that of all the books that I have sitting in my to-be-read pile, they wanted me to check out Mushoku Tensei first. Well, I was going to do that, and I am actually reading it right now. I'm about a third of the way through it. But first off, I had to make a stop at a different book because we're doing a podcast recording, and I kind of had to have the book read in time for that. And so my next review is going to be J.K. Haru Summer, or also known as How My Video Got Demonetized by a Single Light Novel Title. So that's going to be my next review. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me in this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.